مرحبا بكم وسهلا في هذه المحاضرة الثانية. وأود أولا أن أذكركم ببعض القواعد الأساسية لكي نقتصد الوقت وكي يتم النقاش المثمر إن شاء الله. فبعد المحاضرة التي أذكر فيها المحاضر أنه لا بد أن يأخذ بعين الاعتبار الترجمة، ولذلك يتكلم بشكل هادئ وبوقت يسمح للمترجمين أن يؤدوا واجبهم. كما أذكركم أنتم أنه بطبيعة الحال نود أن يتدخل الجميع ونود أن يناقش الجميع، فلذلك أتينا، لكن واجب الاقتصاد في الوقت وواجب التداول على المحاضرات والحصص والوقت المحدود، كل هذا يفرض علينا أن نقتصر في الكلام في الأسئلة. ولا أطيل الكلمة للوكا، سيد لوكا، لبدء محاضرته.
I will speak in English, but first of all, let me make a petit hommage en français to Hajel Sidi, que peut-être beaucoup de nous sommes des amis, et vous savez qu'il a eu un grand accident, je peux dire, non, le dernier mois, mais il a eu la force d'être avec nous, et merci beaucoup. D'accord. Let me thank you also to you all. I have tried to tell you when I saw you in the corridors in the hotel or in the city. Okay, I mean, it's personally I have to say that as a person that is half from Italy, half from Barcelona, I personally also feel that I'm also another half from Palestine and another half from Morocco. I have spent some years of my life there. So it's incredible to be in a place, you know, when I see so many friends, so new friends, inshallah, also that we will create during the next days. And now I have to say that I was not that lucky, because I have to talk. I'm expected to talk for 10 minutes about definitions. Okay, usually people who talk about definitions are extremely boring, and at the same time, I have to say that if we want to generate a proper debate, because we have to say that this is actually not a conference, you know, I mean, what we are expected to do here is just to build together our own definitions and our own agenda of action to see how we can contribute as civil society to prevent violent extremism. So first, we need at least to try to have a common definition of what is radicalization, what is violent extremism, what is hate crime, what is hate speech, what is even terrorism, okay? So sorry then for having to talk about this, but hopefully it will be a good space also to listen about what you think. What I will present today are like the preliminary findings of a research that we have been doing at the International Institute for Nonviolent Action at NOVACT, where we have had the opportunity, thank you, Julia. We have had the opportunity to actually have conversations with around 150 practitioners and academics from the Maghreb, Masrek, and Europe, and also we have tried at least to do an intense literature review in order to see all the debates that were present in the civil society environment regarding definitions, okay? And I have to say that that are some of the conclusions, okay, the ones that are projected. I have this, Elia. That is cooler. Okay. And that are some of the conclusions, okay? First of all, let me say that one of the conclusions was that there is a clear lack of research regarding what? I mean, this is even a bit provocative to say that there is a lack of research when it's clear that there are millions of euros invested in terms of research, but the only problem is that almost 90% of the ongoing research connected with violent extremism is at least forgetting two things. One is that when we talk about violent extremism, it's not all about jihadism, terrorism, okay? Because the problem is that when you see to all the publications, someone can feel that there is like a kind of hidden agenda trying to connect terrorist activity with Islam, something that I think is not only wrong, but I think it's also extremely dangerous. And while other things like motivation for a person to become a member of an extreme right movement, motivations and vectors connected with Islamophobia are almost forgotten, and not studied. So, of course, if you just focus on casualties connected with terrorism and jihadism, at the end you will say, you will try to create a new reality where it only matters this. And second, come on, almost all the research is focusing on perpetrators that are or individuals or groups. And what about the states? What about the states? I mean, it's clear that when you consider a definition of terrorism, you should consider also a potential perpetrator as a state. And this is something that, honestly, just some heroes, are able to actually write, discuss, and give proper research connected with the role of state as violent extremist promoters. There is also an evident lack of clear definition. There is an hegemonic definition of what is terrorism, what is violent extremism, what is radicalization, that honestly, as a person who spent several years in Palestine, I think it's extremely dangerous. Nowadays, states are using the category of terrorism or enemy of the states as a category just to target social movements. Even my organization, we have 10 of our team have been expelled or from Morocco or from Palestine, well, by Israel, because of our work as human rights promoters. And it's not only us, of course. I can say, I mean, I don't know you all, but I see many of the people that we have around here that have been targeted as troublemakers, enemies of the states, even terrorists, some of you, And it's clear that generates, the fact that states have the capability to offer their own definition of what is terrorism is extremely dangerous, because there is a clear connection between the state's political agenda and their capacity to identify perpetrators. Lack of social compact, of course, when we talk that we are in a moment in the Euro-Mediterranean region where, let's say, that confidence in politics and governments is not in the best moment, there is an evident lack of confidence with states in order to build common agendas, Then there is the idea that counter-terrorist measures, this is what I have been speaking? That counter-terrorist measures are extremely expensive. Later we will see a graphic, are sometimes needed. I mean, I don't want to be as populist as this, but the problem is that there are, even in the academics, there are proofs that the same counter-terrorist measures that have been taken during the last years may potentially aggravate individual and political grievances that at the end are at the basis of violent extremist movements. So we consider that it's extremely important to study properly if there is a connection between, can counter-terrorist policies be one of the vectors that generates more violent extremism? At least we think that is something we need to consider. And last point, of course, and this is why we are here, is that we consider that as civil society organizations, we have an extremely important role in terms of preventing violent extremism, that nowadays there are many things we are already doing, but there is a lack of common agenda. This is why also we wanted to be all together. And that there are many things that actually as civil society we have an evident added value. The legitimacy to offer some messages, the capacity to offer some messages, the capacity to actually connect with grassroots movements is something we have, is something we do, and is extremely important actually to try to potentiate this role. And now I will go, to definitions. I will try to be not that long. This is a very simple scheme, just to say that when we talk about perpetrators, we should consider individuals, of course, we should consider groups, and of course we should consider states. And we consider that at the end, the process of radicalization, adopting violent extremist ideas and adopting violent tactics it's quite similar actually for the three groups, of course. We are simplifying just to make a frame that will help each other to understand each other, okay? When we talk about radicalization, okay, we consider, after doing this literature review and talking with activist practitioners and academics, that when we talk about radicalization, first of all, it's a dangerous word. Myself, I consider myself a radical, if you want. So, and there are several radical movements that have made possible the world where we are today. You know, almost all the achievements in terms of civil and political rights, or even economic rights of our history, have been promoted by radical movements. At the same time, of course, it's important to consider that it's not the same a non-violent radicalization that violent radicalization. Okay, for the purpose of this meeting, we should understand that we are talking about violent radicalization, that in terms of violent radicalization is just to say that we should consider at least three levels: individual levels, social and cultural levels as pull factors, and also is extremely important to mention push factors, okay, the context that makes possible to create the environment that generates more violent extremism. Since there will be a panel on this, I prefer not to focus a lot on motivations, but at least I wanted to offer you a very simple scheme that has not been done by Novat, it has been done by the Institute of Economics and Peace, that is just giving us a scheme regarding push factors, okay? Political motivations, that as you see in the OECD countries, the key motivations that generate more violent extremism is connected with the involvement on external conflict, low social cohesion, lack of opportunities. Please never say that poverty generates more violent extremism, okay? And in non-OECD countries, political terror and internal conflict are one of the main motivations. And it's important to see this circle, okay, to understand that how individual and group grievances are generating violent extremist activity, government counter-terrorism response, and how this decrease in civil liberties increase also political tension, and at the end, one generates the other. I make the same mistake all the time. And about violent extremism, we understand that we want to suggest to this group that when we will talk about violent extremism, we will talk about ideologies, okay? And what kind of ideologies? One quite common definition is to understand violent extremism as the ideologies as the ones that legitimate the use of violence in order to achieve political goals, okay? But since this is quite we feel it's too simple, okay? At least we consider that it was needed to consider two main ideas. One, this is, maybe you are familiar with this is the triangle of violence of Galtung, okay, that in terms of peace building is a quite common tool. But it's just to say that when we talk about violent extremist ideologies, we should not consider only violence in terms of direct violence, okay? It's extremely important also to study latent violence, that we mean structural violence and cultural violence. What is structural violence? States provoke structural violence. When you decide that a specific group, because of their familiar origin, their religion, their culture, their values, should have not the same access to basic needs or equal citizen to others, you are provoking structural violence in front of them. Then I will have to go extremely fast. Second idea, what is regarding the definition of violent extremism? It should be connected with the idea of totalitarianism that was defined by Hannah Arendt and Adorno as ideologies that want to abolish individualism, that there is an internal model based on superior-inferior, okay, non-democratic, and that prefer violence over persuasion. And finally, the third level, okay, is connected with action, where I think it's very important to say that in the focus that we want to suggest to this audience, we don't want to focus only in terrorism. I mean, terrorism is not a neutral word. There is a legal definition of what is terrorism that, of course, should be considered. In terms of the United Nations, it has never been possible to have a common definition. This is part of the problem we are having, and actually tomorrow there will be a workshop on this, so I don't want to give you a lot of time. But in terms of each one of our states, the penal codes have a proper definition of what is terrorism. And usually it is defined as a specific tactic of violence where you are targeting people in order to generate a general state of fear in a population to provoke political change. That means that there are many other kinds of violence provoked by violent extremism that are not terrorism. For instance, hate speech, for instance, hate crimes, and of course, for instance, structural violence, as it was defined before. And just to say, just to challenge some rumors, since terrorism, let's say, is the word that is present in all the newspapers, I think it's important just to compare what are the casualties of terrorism compared with other forms of violence, for instance, interpersonal violence. And please, let's see how much we are invested as our societies in terms of countering violent extremism. Okay, the color in the United States, the red color, let's say, is what we are actually losing because of casualties provoked by terrorism. All the other color is what we are investing in terms of countering violent extremism. As we see as a society, we lose much more for paying counter-terrorist activities than what we lose because of terrorism. This is the homicide rate. As you see, in most of our societies, I mean, homicide as a particular form of violence is much more, it generates much more casualties. This, I think, there is no time. But in terms of rumors, I also would like to tell you that just to keep on challenging this idea that terrorism is something connected with just a particular violent extremist ideology that could be jihadist terrorism, this is the story of who has been provoking attacks and casualties. In terms of terrorism, we are talking, and we are not talking about hate speech or hate crimes. And as you see, political extremists, in this case, extreme right movements, are the main perpetrator of casualties in Europe between 2001 and 2014. Okay, so if we have to choose an enemy, I'm provoking by saying this, it will be right-wing, extreme right movements. And that are the entry points. That what I wanted to say is that counter-terror, and this is important if we want to have an agreement, okay, that counter-terrorist measures are acting between people, individuals, groups, and groups in this case, because counter-terrorists are not dealing with states usually. The connection, the entry point where they work is between, let's say, an individual who adopts a violent extremist ideology and the act of violence. And we want to suggest to you that in terms of preventing violent extremism, the entry point should be between radicalization and violent extremists. I mean that we should open the debates of ideas.